Europe. For generations of American travelers, it has been the dream. The cathedrals, the canals, the cafe tables spilling out onto cobblestone streets, the wine that costs less than water, the feeling of walking through history with every step. Europe was the trip. The one you saved for, the one you told people about for years afterward. But something has changed. The prices have climbed to levels that would have been unthinkable a decade ago. The crowds have grown so large that some cities are legally restricting who can enter and when. Locals in the most beloved destinations have taken to the streets, some carrying protest signs, others literally squirting tourists with water guns, demanding that something change. Entry fees, tourist taxes, booking requirements, capacity caps. The rules are multiplying everywhere you look. And for many travelers, especially those on fixed budgets, the math no longer adds up. You spend thousands of dollars to reach a city, and then discover that the experience you paid for has been overrun, overpriced, and overwhelmed. Today, we're counting down 10 European cities that are increasingly failing to deliver on their promise, ranked from most manageable to the one destination where the gap between expectation and reality has grown the widest. And number 1 is not the city most people see coming. Let's begin. Number 10, London. London is one of the most extraordinary cities on the planet. No serious list of European travel could ignore it. The British Museum alone, free to enter, filled with 2 million years of human history, is worth crossing an ocean for. The National Gallery, the Tate Modern, the Tower of London, Westminster Abbey, the markets at Borough and Portobello Road. The Theatre District, which regularly offers world-class performances that rival or exceed Broadway, often at lower prices. The sheer density of extraordinary things available in a single city is genuinely unmatched. All of that remains true. But here is the reality that catches American travelers off guard in 2025 and beyond. London is no longer a bargain, and it hasn't been for some time. Average hotel rates in the city center now run well over $200 per night, and that number climbs steeply during summer months, when the city receives the bulk of its roughly 21 million annual international visitors. A simple restaurant meal for 2 adults, without alcohol, in a mid-range establishment near the popular tourist zones, runs $60 to $80 or more. The paid attractions, the Tower of London, the rides on the South Bank start at $30 per adult and go up from there. Then, there are the transport costs. The underground is efficient and reliable, but a single journey costs more than many visitors expect. A tourist attempting to take 3 or 4 tube journeys per day across a week will spend more on transport than they anticipated before a single entrance fee is paid. There's also the exchange rate reality. With the pound consistently strong against the dollar, everything American travelers buy in London arrives with a built-in markup they don't feel at home. The honest verdict: London absolutely belongs on a European itinerary, especially for first-time visitors. The free museums alone make a compelling case. But travelers expecting the London of travel brochures, affordable pubs, cheap full English breakfasts, wallet-friendly exploration will find a city that costs more per day than nearly any comparable European destination. Locals point to cities like Edinburgh, which delivers equally historic drama at noticeably better prices, or Manchester, which gives you the culture, the food, and the nightlife without the Zone 1 premium. But if London's costs feel steep, number 9 has a price problem of an entirely different variety, one that the city has actually started weaponizing. Number 9, Venice. Venice is, without any argument, one of the most visually extraordinary places human beings have ever created. No other city like it exists anywhere in the world. The Grand Canal, the Basilica di San Marco, the Rialto Bridge. The sensation of arriving by water taxi and realizing that there are no cars, no roads, no traffic signals, just boats and gondolas and bridges and water is genuinely unlike anything else travel can offer. The city is also slowly sinking and steadily shrinking. In the 1970s, roughly 175,000 people lived in Venice's historic center. Today, that number has fallen below 50,000. The residents who remain are being steadily displaced by tourist accommodation. There are now more tourist beds in Venice than there are permanent residents. More than 30 million people visit each year, with the majority arriving as day trippers who flood in from cruise ships or mainland trains, fill the streets for a few hours, and leave. In 2024, Venice became the first city in the world to charge tourists an entry fee just to walk into its historic center. The fee started at €5 per person per day. By 2025, the number of fee-enforced days had nearly doubled, and last-minute bookings triggered a charge of €10. By 2026, the program expanded again, now covering 60 days across the peak spring and early summer season. Arrive at the wrong time without your registration code and face a fine of up to €300. The system requires travelers to pre-register online, download a QR code, and potentially show it at checkpoints staffed by inspectors scattered through the city. Visitors arriving as part of cruise ship excursions have faced particular confusion, as the exemption rules are specific and the penalty for non-compliance is real. And beyond the entry fee, Venice is notoriously expensive for everything it provides. A gondola ride costs €80 for a shared 40-minute journey. Restaurants within sight of any major landmark charge prices well beyond their quality. Hotel rooms on the island itself are among the most expensive in Europe. The honest verdict: Venice is still worth seeing, but it now requires careful advance planning, genuine budget preparation, and a realistic understanding that what awaits you is one of the most congested tourist corridors in the world. The magic is real. It's just shared with several thousand other people simultaneously. Many experienced travelers now recommend Trieste, the elegant Habsburg port city 2 hours east, or Bologna, with better food, more authentic streets, and none of the crowds. Number 8 has a very different problem. It's a city where the crowds aren't arriving yet, but the costs already have, and the gap between price and experience is growing conspicuously wide. Number 8, Copenhagen. Copenhagen is a genuinely wonderful city. It tops the world's happiest city rankings. It is clean, safe, bicycle-friendly, and architecturally beautiful. The Nyhavn Canal, its rows of colorful 17th-century townhouses reflected in still water, is one of the most photographed streetscapes in Europe. The food culture here produced Noma, long ranked among the greatest restaurants on Earth, and the broader dining scene ranges from extraordinary to excellent. The Tivoli Gardens amusement park, founded in 1843, is a genuine delight even for adults. The design, the furniture, the fashion, the sense of thoughtful civic beauty that permeates everything Copenhagen earns its reputation. But here is the number that matters. According to the European Backpacker Price Index for 2025, Copenhagen ranks among the most expensive cities in all of Europe for travelers. Budget travelers, those staying in modest accommodations and eating carefully, can expect to spend roughly $120 to $150 per day in Copenhagen before any significant attractions. A mid-range traveler, staying in a decent hotel and eating at sit-down restaurants, will spend $200 to $250 or more per day. A 3-course dinner for 2 with wine in a mid-range restaurant costs more than 3 times what the same meal would run in Lisbon. Alcohol pricing is particularly shocking for American visitors. A beer in a Copenhagen bar runs $8 to $10. A glass of wine at a standard restaurant easily reaches $15 to $20. Travelers who enjoy a drink with their evenings will find this adds up with surprising speed. The paid tourist attractions are also costly. Entry to Rosenborg Castle runs nearly $30 per person. Tivoli Gardens charges around $20 per person for general admission, with rides costing extra. Day after day, these fees accumulate in ways that smaller European budgets simply can't absorb. The honest verdict: Copenhagen rewards travelers with significant budgets who genuinely want to experience Nordic design, food culture, and quality of life at the highest level. For budget-conscious travelers, retirees on fixed incomes, or anyone hoping to spend 2 weeks exploring Europe without burning through savings at an alarming rate, Copenhagen should be approached very carefully or saved for a short, specifically planned splurge. Those looking for Scandinavian charm at a fraction of the price consistently discover Riga, Latvia, a city with stunning Art Nouveau architecture, a walkable medieval old town, and daily costs that run less than half of Copenhagen's average. If you think the Scandinavian cost problem is daunting, number 7 has been in the news for a very different reason, because the locals there have started pushing back in ways that are impossible to ignore. Number 7, Barcelona. Barcelona is one of the great cities of the world. Gaudi's architecture alone, the Sagrada Familia, the Casa Bartollo, the sinuous tile work of Güell Park represents a singular creative vision that has no equivalent anywhere on Earth. The food culture, from Pine Texos bars to world-class seafood, is extraordinary. The climate is magnificent. The beaches are beautiful. The medieval Gothic quarter contains streets and squares that feel genuinely medieval. By almost any measure, Barcelona is a masterwork of a city, and it is also, right now, a city that is genuinely angry. In 2024, locals marched in organized protests through Barcelona's streets, carrying banners reading, "Tourists go home," and "Barcelona is not for sale." Some protesters targeted restaurant patrons with water pistols. The following summer, thousands more took to the streets again. The anger is specific and well-founded. Rent prices in Barcelona increased by 18% in a single year, driven in significant part by the conversion of housing stock into tourist accommodation. Over the past decade, rent in the city rose by 68%, and the cost of purchasing a home climbed by 38%, while local wages have not remotely kept pace. The city has responded with its own restrictions. Short-term rentals are being phased out entirely by 2028. The tourist tax, already among the highest in Spain, continues to climb, reaching fees of up to €15 per person per night by 2026. Organized bar crawls have been banned. Cruise ship capacity is being capped. The message the city is sending is clear. For visitors, this creates a complicated experience. The city is still magnificent. But the most popular areas, Las Ramblas, the Gothic Quarter, the neighborhoods around the Sagrada Familia are so saturated with tour groups and organized excursions that navigating them during peak hours requires patience many travelers don't have. And the sense of being in a place that has begun to resent its own visitors adds an uncomfortable undercurrent to the experience. The honest verdict: Barcelona remains worth visiting, but the best experience now requires deliberately avoiding its most famous corridors, staying in residential neighborhoods, and visiting in shoulder season when the tension between locals and tourists is somewhat less pronounced. Travelers who love Barcelona's energy, food, and coastal character increasingly discover San Sebastian, a smaller, equally food-obsessed Basque city with Pinexos bars that rival anything in Barcelona, cooler temperatures, and a fraction of the crowds. Number 6 is a city where the problem isn't protests, it's something far more systematic, and it was actually investigated and fined by the government. Number 6, Rome. Rome is eternal. That's not a slogan. It's an accurate description of a place where you can walk from a 2nd century Roman temple to a Baroque masterpiece, to a Renaissance fresco, to a thriving neighborhood cafe in the span of 20 minutes. The Colosseum, the Forum, the Vatican museums, the Trevi Fountain, the Pantheon, the sheer concentration of civilization's greatest achievements within a single city is staggering. But Rome is also, increasingly, a difficult place to visit. In April 2025, Italy's antitrust authority announced a finding that rocked the international travel industry. Software bots automated programs had been used to bulk purchase Colosseum tickets in vast quantities, making them effectively unavailable through official channels at standard prices. The company managing official ticketing for the Colosseum from 1997 to 2024, along with 6 major tour operators, was collectively fined nearly €20 million. The investigation found that standard tickets had been made substantially and prolongedly unavailable, while the same tickets were being resold at dramatically higher prices, bundled with tours and priority access packages visitors hadn't asked for and didn't need. In plain terms, for years, tourists trying to buy a standard Colosseum ticket online found them perpetually sold out because they had already been purchased by companies planning to sell them back at inflated prices. The Colosseum welcomes almost 15 million visitors per year. The fraud was systematic and sustained. That's only one layer of Rome's visitor protection problem. The Trevi Fountain, which draws 30,000 visitors per day at peak times, introduced a new entry fee in February 2026. Restaurateurs near St. Peter's Square routinely charge 30 to 50 euros per main course for food that would cost 10 to 15 in a neighborhood 2 streets away. Men dressed as Roman centurions near major attractions press visitors to take photographs, then demand money aggressively when they do. Street-level ticketing fraud at transport stations has been extensively documented. The honest verdict: Rome is irreplaceable and absolutely worth visiting. But you must book all major attractions months in advance, exclusively through official sources, and maintain the same level of vigilance you'd apply in any major city where tourist economics have created persistent scam infrastructure. The experience is extraordinary. The preparation required to reach it has grown more demanding year by year. Travelers who want ancient history without the Roman-scale chaos consistently discover Bologna, just 35 minutes by fast train, Italy's most underrated city, with astonishing food, elegant medieval arcades, and a genuinely local character that Rome's center has largely lost. Number 5 has a problem that Americans find particularly jarring because it's a destination that used to be famous for being affordable, and almost nobody told them it changed. Number 5, Lisbon. Not long ago, Lisbon was Europe's secret. Travelers who had discovered it kept it close, recommending it in hushed tones to those they trusted. The dramatic hilltop neighborhoods, the yellow trams rattling through streets so steep they should be impossible, the custard tarts, the fado music drifting from tavern doorways on warm evenings, the tiles, the light, that particular Atlantic light that photographers travel from around the world to capture, and best of all, the price. Lisbon was one of the most affordable European capitals, and that made the luxury of its beauty feel like an extraordinary gift. Between 2014 and 2024, property prices in Lisbon rose by 176%. In the historic center, they climbed by more than 200%. A University of Lisbon study, adjusting for local income levels, found that Lisbon now has the least affordable housing market in Europe. The European Commission assessed Portuguese homes to be overvalued by roughly 35%, the only country in the EU where overvaluation was still actively increasing. What drove this? Tourism, in significant part. Approximately half of the properties in Lisbon's central districts were registered as short-term rentals by 2024. In the most visitor-heavy areas, that proportion reached 70%. Lisbon now has 6 times the short-term rental density of Barcelona. The hospitality infrastructure that created affordability for residents has been systematically converted into accommodation for visitors, which raises prices for visitors in turn. For American travelers who last visited Lisbon 5 or 10 years ago, the return trip produces genuine shock. Hotel prices in the historic neighborhoods Alfama, Bairro, Alto, Chiado now rival major Western European capitals. Restaurants in the tourist zone charge prices that no longer reflect Portugal's reputation for value. The famous number 28 tram, which winds through some of the most beautiful neighborhoods in the city, has become so famous that locals largely avoid it, and riders can wait in lines that stretch a full city block. The honest verdict: Lisbon is still beautiful. It is still worth seeing. But travelers arriving with the expectation of the affordable, off-the-beaten-path gem of a decade ago will find a city that has been substantially reshaped by its own success. The alternatives locals now recommend include Porto, still somewhat less expensive and arguably more authentically Portuguese, and the medieval city of Évora in the Alentejo interior, a UNESCO site with Roman ruins and almost no crowds at all. If you think Lisbon's transformation is striking, number 4 is a destination that has undergone a change so complete that the travel industry has a specific word for what happened to it, and it comes from a TV show. Number 4, Dubrovnik. Dubrovnik sits on the Dalmatian coast of Croatia, encircled by medieval stone walls that drop straight into the Adriatic. It is one of the best preserved fortified medieval cities in the world. The main pedestrian street, the Stradun, is paved with limestone so polished it gleams in sunlight. The old harbor, the churches, the monasteries, the views from the walls across orange rooftops to blue water, Dubrovnik is, in the genuine sense, a jewel. Then Game of Thrones chose it as the filming location for King's Landing, the capital city of Westeros. The effect on tourism was immediate and enormous. What had already been a popular destination became a global pilgrimage site for millions of fans. Cruise ships began docking in numbers the city had never experienced. At the peak of the show's popularity, up to 8 large cruise ships arrived on a single day, each carrying 2,000 tourists or more, offloading up to 16,000 day trippers into a walled old town with a permanent population of roughly 1,500 people. According to the sustainable travel organization Responsible Travel, Dubrovnik has been ranked the most overcrowded city in the world, with 27 tourists for every resident at its peak. UNESCO, which lists Dubrovnik as a World Heritage Site, warned that the city's protected status was at risk due to the surge in visitor numbers. The human cost inside the walls has been severe. The permanent population of the old town was approximately 5,000 people in 1991. It has since fallen to roughly 1,500. Homes and apartments have been converted wholesale into tourist accommodation, destroying the neighborhood fabric and pricing out any possibility of normal residential life. For visitors, the experience of navigating Dubrovnik during peak summer is frequently described as deeply frustrating. The streets of the old town are so narrow that crowds of this density make simple movement difficult. Local residents, the few who remain, describe feeling like prisoners inside a destination others have come to consume. A local musician once told a news agency, "We have crowds of people who are simply running around to take selfies and photos. That's it." The city is now fighting back. From 2026, the famous city walls require advance booking. Cruise ships are capped at 2 per day with a minimum stay requirement. Taxis have been reduced from 9,000 permitted vehicles to 700. The mayor has proposed a broader daily visitor cap to bring the pressure on infrastructure down to manageable levels. The honest verdict: Dubrovnik is genuinely, breathtakingly beautiful, but visiting it at the wrong time of year is one of the most reliably disappointing experiences in European travel. If you go, do so in early spring or late October, when the ships are fewer and the streets can breathe again, and understand that much of what you're visiting is a city fighting for its own survival. The Dalmatian coast offers extraordinary alternatives. The town of Kotor in Montenegro, just 2 hours south, delivers equal medieval drama with a fraction of the tourist volume. Number 3 has a problem that unfolds at a scale so large that local residents have actually sued their own city government over it. Number 3, Amsterdam. Amsterdam is magnificent. This is a city of masterpieces. Rembrandt's Night Watch, Vermeer's The Milkmaid, Van Gogh's self-portraits housed in world-class museums that deserve every traveler's time. The Canal Ring, engineered in the 17th century, is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Its 165 waterways, lined with leaning merchant houses whose reflection shimmers in water that has reflected them for 400 years. The cycling culture is extraordinary, a city actually designed around human beings rather than automobiles. The food market culture, the Indonesian rijsttafel from the colonial trade era, the herring stands on the street Amsterdam, offers genuine pleasures at every turn. But Amsterdam has been at war with its own tourist industry for years, and travelers are now caught in the middle. In 2024, Amsterdam recorded 22.9 million overnight tourist stays, a 3% increase from the prior year, and significantly above the self-imposed cap of 20 million the city had set for itself. In response to the third consecutive year of the cap being exceeded, a group of 12 local residents' organizations filed a formal lawsuit against the city government in September 2025, arguing that authorities had failed to enforce their own rules. The city now carries Europe's highest tourist tax rate, 12.5% of every accommodation price, with proposals to raise it further. New hotel construction has been frozen unless an existing hotel closes. Airbnb rentals in residential properties are capped at 30 nights per year. For visitors, the practical consequences are clear. Accommodation costs have risen steadily. The most desirable canal ring neighborhoods during peak summer now require booking months in advance at prices that reflect enormous demand and deliberately constrained supply. The city center, particularly around the Rijksmuseum and the Anne Frank House, which requires booking weeks or months ahead, experiences crowding that compresses the experience into something much thinner than it deserves to be. The city's red light district, long marketed as a must-see novelty, has been actively campaigned against by city authorities who want to reduce the rowdier form of party tourism. Aggressive promoters outside certain venues in that district have been widely documented attempting to pull visitors into establishments with hidden fees and misleading menus. The honest verdict: Amsterdam's cultural institutions, the Rijksmuseum, the Van Gogh Museum, the Anne Frank House, are essential and irreplaceable. But the full city experience, in peak season, at peak prices, with peak crowds, now delivers significantly less value per dollar than it once did. Late autumn and winter visits, when the tourist tax hasn't changed but the demand has dropped, offer a dramatically different and more rewarding experience. Travelers who love Amsterdam's canal beauty and cycling culture often discover Ghent in Belgium, a city of nearly equal canal beauty, world-class medieval architecture, outstanding food, and none of the mass tourism infrastructure burden. Number 2 has a problem that is both heartbreaking and entirely predictable. A place that may be the world's most beautiful island destination, now struggling under the weight of its own fame. Number 2, Santorini. Santorini is the dream. The white cubic houses cascading down the caldera cliffs, the bright blue church domes, the sunsets over the Aegean from the village of Oya, where the light turns the water into liquid gold. The photographs of Santorini are everywhere on screensavers, on hotel lobby walls, on travel magazines, because no place else on Earth looks quite like it. The dream of sitting on that terrace with a glass of wine watching the sun sink into the sea is one of the most popular travel fantasies in the world. The reality of Santorini, for a significant number of travelers, has become something quite different. Santorini is a small island, just 76 square kilometers. In 2023 and 2024, it received 3.4 million annual visitors. A German Federal Statistical Office analysis found that the South Aegean region, which includes Santorini and Mykonos, recorded 117 overnight tourist stays per resident in a single year, the highest tourist density ratio of any region in the European Union. On peak days, cruise ships alone unloaded 17,000 passengers onto this tiny island. The mayor of Santorini, Nikos Zorzos, said publicly that the island was saturated and that he had been warning of catastrophe for more than a decade. In 2024, a Metro UK reader poll ranked Santorini the second most disappointing travel destination of the year, with overcrowding cited as the primary reason. Visitors reported being unable to move through the village of Oya's main street at peak hours, a lane-width corridor packed shoulder to shoulder with tour groups. One respondent described the situation as so crowded that you couldn't walk, not even get past people to go to the other side. The cost structure is punishing. Hotel rooms in Santorini's most desirable locations, the caldera-facing cave hotels that dominate the imagery, cost between 500 and 1,000 $500 per night during peak season. Restaurant meals at Caldera View establishments charge luxury prices for food that frequently doesn't justify them. Transport on the island is limited, taxis are scarce, and the combination of summer heat, steep terrain, and density makes walking in peak July or August genuinely exhausting. The island also imposed a specific cruise passenger levy, now among the highest in Greece, at €20 per person during peak months, in response to the strain cruise tourism places on roads, paths, and services without generating proportional economic benefit. The honest verdict: Santorini is, without question, one of the most beautiful places on the planet. But the version of it that lives in the travel photograph is increasingly available only during the shoulder months, October, November, or early May, when the cruise ships are fewer and the island's extraordinary character can actually be felt. The Greek island of Sifnos, 2 hours by ferry from Athens, offers volcanic scenery, some of the best food in all of Greece, crystalline water, and almost none of the crowds. Foligandros is similarly beautiful, similarly uncrowded, similarly extraordinary. Number 1 may surprise you. It is not the city most Americans expect, but it represents the fullest expression of what happens when the gap between what a destination promises and what it delivers grows wider than anywhere else in Europe. Number 1, Paris. Paris. No word in the language of travel carries more weight. The Eiffel Tower, Notre Dame, recently restored to breathtaking glory. The Louvre, the Champs-Élysées, Montmartre. The Seine. The food, the fashion, the cafe culture, the art, the philosophy of daily life elevated to an aesthetic practice. Paris is not merely a city. It is an idea, the idea that human beings, given enough time and enough care, can create something approaching perfection. And Paris remains, by any honest accounting, one of the most extraordinary cities ever assembled. It also now sits at the precise intersection of every major travel problem of the modern era. In 2024, Paris welcomed 48.7 million tourists. That is nearly 25 times the city's resident population. In August of 2025, local residents and shopkeepers in Montmartre, one of the city's most beloved and supposedly authentic neighborhoods, launched formal protests against what they called the Disneyfication of the area. Butchers, bakeries, and traditional grocers, they reported, were disappearing from the streets of Montmartre and being replaced by ice cream stalls, bubble tea vendors, and souvenir t-shirt shops. The Sacré-Cœur Basilica, the most visited monument in all of France, and the streets surrounding it had become what locals described as an open-air theme park. At the Louvre, staff staged a wildcat strike in 2024 over chronic overcrowding, understaffing, and deteriorating conditions. The museum logged 8.7 million visitors that year, more than double the visitor volume its infrastructure was designed to handle. The world's most famous museum, overwhelmed by its own fame. Admission to the Louvre was raised from 17 to €22 per person. The Trevi Fountain in Rome introduced an entry fee and cited Paris-style saturation as the precedent they were following. Entry fees and restrictive booking systems are now spreading to more Parisian landmarks as the only available response to volumes that infrastructure cannot absorb. And Paris is expensive. A mid-range hotel in a decent neighborhood during summer starts at €200 to €300 per night. Dining anywhere within sight of a major landmark means paying tourist zone prices for food that frequently disappoints. The metro is efficient and well-connected, but the experience of using it during peak hours is often uncomfortable, and pickpocketing in crowded stations and on certain lines remains one of the most persistent and well-documented concerns in all of European travel. The practical consequence for travelers is this: experiencing Paris well now requires months of advanced planning, a significant budget, genuine stamina for crowds, and an ability to navigate reservation systems, entry protocols, and tourist zone pricing that collectively add friction to nearly every interaction. The city rewards expertise, It punishes the first-timer who arrives with only a dream and a debit card. The honest verdict: Paris still delivers on its greatest promises, but only for those who know exactly how to reach them. The Musée d'Orsay, slightly less overwhelming than the Louvre. The Sainte-Chapelle, which houses the most beautiful stained glass in the world and is somehow still underappreciated. The Marais neighborhood on a weekday morning. The covered passages built in the 19th century that most tourists walk past without noticing. The view from the Trocadero across to the Eiffel Tower at golden hour, when the light does exactly what the photographs always promised. Those moments still exist. But finding them now requires fighting through a version of Paris that has been deformed by its own success. The city of Lyon, 2 hours south by train, is what France looked like before global tourism arrived. 3 rivers. Extraordinary food. Arguably the greatest food city in France, which means one of the greatest in the world. A UNESCO-listed historic center of extraordinary depth and beauty, and a fraction of the tourist burden that now defines the Paris experience. Here is what all of this really means. Europe has not gotten worse. The cathedrals are still standing. The art is still hanging. The food is still extraordinary. The cultures that produce these things over thousands of years remain vital and worth encountering. What has changed is the equation between what you pay, what you experience, and what the journey actually gives you. The traveler who books the most famous city in Europe, arrives in peak season without reservations, assumes the prices will resemble what they read about 5 years ago, and wanders into the most photographed street looking for authenticity, that traveler will frequently be disappointed. Not because Europe failed them, because the Europe they imagined was already being replaced by something more complicated. The traveler who does 5 minutes of research beyond the first Google result will discover something remarkable. The continent is enormous. It contains hundreds of cities, thousands of towns, and landscapes of extraordinary variety and beauty, the vast majority of which are not fighting over tourism, not raising entry fees, not drowning in a million other people trying to take the same photograph. Ghent instead of Amsterdam, Plovdiv instead of Athens, Porto instead of Lisbon, Kotor instead of Dubrovnik, Bologna instead of Rome, Strasbourg instead of Paris, a city that sits precisely on the border of France and Germany, that serves both traditions with unmatched skill, and that you can walk through with room to breathe, and without a reservation made 3 months in advance. The greatest European journeys are rarely the ones that follow the most famous itinerary. They're the ones where something unexpected happened, where a city nobody told you about turned out to be exactly what you needed. That city is out there, it's waiting, and it isn't on the list you already have. Safe travels.